What happens when one of Hollywood's comedy stars reaches his limit, live on TV? That morning on The View, the bright lights felt just a bit hotter, like they knew something big was about to happen. Brad Pitt sat in his chair, smiling politely, though something in his eyes showed he was on alert. Across the table, Sunny Hostin leaned in, looking ready to ask a question that could break that calm look on Brad's face. Before we jump into the heated moment that caused Brad Pitt to walk off set, take a second to subscribe to Prime Narrator and hit the like button. Drop a comment if you've ever seen a celebrity lose it on live television. Your support helps us grow and bring more stories like this one. The tension had been growing since the last commercial. Even the audience could feel it. Their usual clapping had faded to nervous whispers. Joy Behar, who often breaks the ice with a joke, stayed quiet. Whoopi Goldberg rested her chin in her hand, studying Brad with a serious, unreadable look, the kind she wears when something big is about to go down. The talk had started off light. They discussed Brad's latest movie, his work with charities, and his usual friendly charm brought out some laughs. But Sunny's eyes stayed locked on him. She was waiting. She cleared her throat, fixed her notes, and then asked a question that changed the mood completely. "Brad," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you've been praised for years as one of Hollywood's top actors. But some people think you only speak out when it's easy. Especially when it comes to calling out problems in the film world. Do you think that's fair?" The question hung in the air, silencing even the smallest coughs in the crowd. Brad blinked, his smile starting to fade. He looked over at Joy, then Sunny, and let out a slow breath. "I think everyone decides how they want to use their voice," he said evenly. "Sometimes the best way to help isn't by talking on camera." Sunny tilted her head, her tone sharpening just a bit. "But don't you think that being silent, especially for someone as well known as you, can sometimes look like you're letting it happen?" The audience let out a quiet gasp. The camera caught Brad's jaw tighten for a second before he forced it to relax. He leaned in a little, hands on the table. "I don't think staying quiet means you're okay with something," he replied, voice steady but deeper, like thunder far away. "There are important talks that happen off camera. Private talks that still count." Sunny didn't back down. "But the public doesn't see those private talks. What they see is someone famous staying quiet while others speak up. Isn't it easier to be quiet when others are taking the heat?" The room went still, tight like a pulled string. Whoopi glanced between Brad and Sunny. The audience didn't move, everyone holding their breath. Brad gave a small laugh, but it sounded forced. "That's one way to look at it," he said. "But for me, being quiet isn't easy. I just choose my moments." Sunny leaned in closer. Her voice dropped lower but steadier. "But don't you think that picking your battles can sometimes look like privilege?" The air grew heavy. People shifted in their seats. One whispered, "Wow," and a mic picked it up. Brad looked away for a second before looking Sunny in the eye. "Privilege," he repeated quietly, like he was tasting the word. "That's a big word to toss out in a 3-minute chat. Big words for a big issue," Sunny answered, calm as ever. Something in Brad's posture changed. He sat taller, his face hard. His eyes flashed with something, maybe anger, maybe defense. "Look," he said slowly, "I came here to talk about my film. About causes I believe in. Not to be scolded for what you call privilege. I've lived my life responsibly, maybe not in the way you expect, but in my own way." The audience murmured, shocked. Joy leaned in, maybe hoping to break the tension. Okay, let's," she started, but Sunny lifted her hand and stayed focused on Brad. "I'm not trying to scold you, Brad," she said, voice a little softer, but still strong. "I'm asking because people see you as a leader. And when you don't speak, they wonder if you even see what's wrong." Brad tapped his fingers on the table, a nervous tick the camera caught. His breathing deepened slightly, a sign his calm was starting to fray. Maybe, he said. The problem is we now expect actors to be the world's moral guides. I didn't sign up to be a leader. I tell stories. The tension in the room had reached its peak, that quiet right before something snaps. Sunny narrowed her eyes a bit, like she was carefully picking her next move. You can say that, Brad, she said, calm but sharp. But with your platform, choosing to stay neutral is still a choice. And in times like these, Brad cut her off, louder than anyone expected. Don't tell me what neutrality is. The crowd gasped. One of the camera operators jolted in surprise. Even Whoopi sat up straighter, eyes wide. Brad blinked, seeming to realize how loud he had been, but it was too late. The words were out, raw and real. He breathed out, jaw tight. The crowd stirred again, whispering softly. They knew they'd just seen something rare, a crack in Brad Pitt's cool image. A producer backstage waved frantically, telling the camera crew to stay zoomed in on the faces at the table. Sunny didn't flinch. Her voice softened just a little, but it still had strength behind it, almost like a whisper made of steel. This is the talk people have been waiting to hear from you, she said. For a second, Brad and Sunny locked eyes. His stare burned with frustration, while hers remained steady and calm. The rest of the world seemed to fade away, as if only that table and those two voices existed. Just then, the stage manager waved his hand, signaling for a commercial break. The bright applause sign lit up, but no one clapped. The audience stayed silent, as if clapping might ruin the powerful moment they had just watched. The camera light turned off, and the happy music played quietly in the background, but the tension at the table didn't disappear. It stayed thick, heavy, like storm clouds that wouldn't move on. The usual break time chatter was gone. The studio lights buzzed faintly overhead. A producer shuffled note cards in his hand. Brad sat stiff in his seat, staring down at his hands as if the wooden table might somehow give him the answers he was searching for. Sunny leaned back slightly, her face unreadable, but her eyes never left Brad. She was studying him closely. Joy Behar reached for her water bottle, the small click of the cap breaking the stillness. Whoopi glanced at one of the producers, then looked back at Brad. Her face showed a mix of concern and curiosity, a look that only a veteran host like her could wear so naturally. A floor manager came close and whispered, "We're back in 30. Let's keep it smooth." Brad didn't respond. He tapped his fingers on the table once, then stopped. Slowly, he looked up, first at Sunny, then at Whoopi, as if trying to figure out what he should say, or if it was even worth saying anything at all. He leaned in and spoke just loud enough for the table to hear. "If this is just going to be a public trial," he said, "I don't know why I even agreed to come." Whoopi tilted her head slightly, her voice low and steady. "No one's putting you on trial, Brad. You know how this show goes. We talk about the real stuff." Brad let out a sharp breath and shook his head once. "Real stuff is fine. But there's a difference between having a real talk and getting cross-examined." Sunny didn't answer right away. She kept watching him, calm and thoughtful. Then she said softly, "You know, it's not personal. These are the questions people ask." Brad glanced at her. "Yeah," he said, his tone short. "But sometimes it feels like it's not really about the question, it's just about getting the headline." The floor manager raised his hand. 10 seconds. Brad straightened up in his seat. His face smoothed out, like someone putting on a mask. The red lights on the cameras blinked back on. The audience stirred, sensing the show was returning. The hosts smiled, their voices lifted a little higher, but the tension didn't go away. It stayed under the surface, silent but strong. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi said, her voice warm but carrying some weight. "We're here with Brad Pitt, talking about his new film and, well, a bit more than that." The audience clapped politely, then quickly stopped. Brad gave a small smile. "Happy to be here. he said. His voice was steady, but it didn't have its usual calm charm. Sunny leaned forward again, resting her arms lightly on the table. Brad, before the break, we were talking about how having a platform brings responsibility. I want to ask, has that responsibility changed over time? Has fame changed what people expect from you? Brad's smile faded a bit. He shifted in his seat, then gave a short laugh that sounded more like a sigh. I don't think fame has changed that much, he said. What's changed is the noise around it. Everyone has a phone, a voice, and an opinion. You can't even breathe without someone telling you should have breathed differently. A few people in the crowd chuckled at the line, but Sunny didn't laugh. She kept her gaze steady. But isn't that part of the job now? She asked. To use your voice in the middle of all that noise? Brad looked at her, his expression tightening. I'm an actor, Sunny. I tell stories. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a politician. I help in the ways I can. If that's not loud enough for some people. He paused, spreading his hands slightly. Then what do you want from me? Sunny tilted her head. But sometimes, she said, silence can tell a story too. The audience let out a quiet ooh, like they just heard something sharp, but polite. Once again, the air grew heavy. Joy jumped in, her voice lighter, trying to break the growing tension. Come on, she said. Brad's done like 50 movies. Maybe he just wants a break from saving the world. A few people laughed. But Brad didn't. He pressed his lips together, gave Joy a quick glance, then turned back to Sunny. It's not about saving the world, he said. It's about people thinking they deserve to know every little thing I believe. Sunny didn't blink. People don't want your every thought, she said. They want to know if you're with them or not. Brad said nothing for a moment. His fingers tapped once, twice, 3 times. Then he finally spoke. You know what's funny? He said, his tone sharper now. I came here to talk about the art, the work. But now none of that seems to matter. All that matters is where I stand. His voice had an edge now, and even people in the back row could hear it. Some audience members shifted in their seats. Sunny kept her voice calm. Art reflects the world we live in. People want to know if the artist sees what they see. Brad leaned in, his hands clasped tight. And what if the artist just wants to make something true, without picking sides? Sunny's eyes narrowed a bit. Then maybe, she said softly, that artist has the luxury to stay out of the fight. The words hit like a quiet but powerful thunderclap. The energy in the studio changed. Even Joy's face grew more serious. Brad's jaw tightened, and his eyes went cold. I didn't come here to be called a coward, he said, voice low but burning underneath. I didn't call you a coward, Sunny replied, steady and clear. I said you have the luxury. That's not the same. The audience held still, the silence stretching long. You could almost hear the cameras capturing every flicker of Brad's face. He stared at Sunny for a long moment. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, pressing his lips into a thin, hard line. Feels the same from where I'm sitting, he muttered. Whoopi stepped in then, her voice calm but carrying a soft warning. All right, she said. Let's remember, we're having a conversation here, not a standoff. Brad gave a short laugh, one with no humor. Sometimes they feel like the same thing. The tension stayed in the room, thick and pressing like summer heat before a storm. Sunny spoke again, her voice softer this time, but her focus just as strong. Brad, I think people just want to hear you say that you see them. That's all. Brad looked away for a moment, toward the edge of the stage, as if searching for an exit or a breath of relief. When he looked back at Sunny, his voice was quieter, but still hard. I see people, he said. I just don't think they always see me for who I really am. There was something raw in how he said it, something almost fragile, but instead of easing the tension, it made the moment even heavier. The show cut to another break. The applause sign lit up again, but this time, the claps were scattered and low. The stage manager glanced toward the table with a tired look. Brad rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes down on the floor like he was deciding whether to stay or leave. Sunny leaned back, her hands laced tightly in front of her. Whoopi whispered something to a nearby producer, but the words were too quiet to catch. Joy took another sip of her water and kept her eyes away from the others. When the cameras returned, Brad's smile had come back, but it looked more like armor than comfort. The hosts picked up the conversation again, but the words now carried a faint shake, like something broken hiding under the surface. No one in the studio knew it yet, but they were only minutes away from the moment everything would fall apart. The next part of the show began with the usual cheerful theme music, the kind that was supposed to make things feel bright and fun. But under those happy notes, the studio air felt charged, like electricity before a lightning strike. The audience clapped, but their faces were tight. They could sense something coming, the way animals sense storms before the clouds roll in. The red camera light blinked back on, and the show went live again. "Welcome back," Whoopi said, her voice steady but slightly heavy. "We're still here with Brad Pitt, talking about his new film, his work, and well, a few other things." Brad smiled at the camera, but it was a practiced smile, smooth, controlled, maybe too perfect. It looked like someone pretending everything was fine while the wind howled behind them. Sunny leaned in, her voice even, her tone thoughtful. "Brad, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said you just want to tell stories, not take sides. I get that. But don't you think the stories we choose to tell, or not tell, can say more than words ever could?" Brad tapped his fingers lightly against the table. The sound was small but caught by the mic. His smile stayed, but his eyes flickered, showing something behind them, something unsure, maybe defensive. "I think stories are meant to open doors," he said. His voice was calm, but tight. "They're not there to tell you which door to walk through." Sunny gave a small nod, taking in the answer but not backing down. "But if you stay neutral in a story about real pain, real injustice, isn't that choosing the side of silence?" The audience shifted again, the sound of bodies leaning and filling the room. The tension was no longer quiet. It had become a soft hum, buzzing beneath every word. Brad breathed in slowly, then out. His eyes stayed fixed on Sunny. "You know," he said, voice low but edged, "I've spent my whole career focusing on the work. I'm not a political voice. I'm not here to give speeches. But it feels like no matter what I do, someone always says I'm doing it wrong." Sunny responded with calm strength. "I don't think people are saying you're doing it wrong. They're asking you to see the power you hold. Your voice can change the way millions of people think about things." Brad gave a short laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. It sounded like a man feeling cornered. "That's a nice idea," he said. "But the truth is, the second you say something, even if you mean well, you become the story. And then no one talks about the issue anymore. It becomes all about you." The audience murmured. A few people nodded. Others whispered quietly. The camera caught Joy shifting in her seat, clearly uneasy as her eyes moved between Brad and Sunny. Sunny's voice softened a bit, but her message stayed strong. "Maybe that's the cost of having influence, Brad. Maybe it's not supposed to be comfortable." Brad's calm slipped a little. His shoulders grew tense. His eyes flashed. "You know what's uncomfortable," he said. "Being told you're not speaking enough, and then being judged even more when you finally do. I've seen that movie. I know how it ends." The audience let out a small, nervous laugh, but it didn't last. The tension was no longer hidden. It sat right there at the table, clear for everyone to see. Whoopi shifted slightly in her seat, trying to ease the weight in the room. "Okay," she said with a faint smile that was meant to calm things down. "Let's all remember why we're here." But Sunny didn't let go of the moment. She spoke over Whoopi, not in a rude way, but with firmness. Brad, I think what people want to know is simple. When they see wrong being done, are you with them or not? That's not a trap. It's just a question. Brad's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned forward, putting his elbows on the table. His voice dropped lower, a little rougher. And I'm telling you, it's not that simple. Life's not that simple. You don't get to know everything I do behind the scenes. That doesn't mean I'm not standing with the right people. Sunny didn't look away. But you won't say it. That small sentence was the spark. Brad's jaw tightened fast. He sat up straighter, placing his hands flat on the table. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It had the sound of a man pushed too far. Because I'm tired of being told I'm not enough, he snapped. The studio went completely quiet. The audience froze. Even the hosts looked shocked. Brad kept going, the dam holding back his feelings now wide open. I've been doing this for decades. I've given time, money, and my name to causes I believe in. But every time I sit here, it's not enough. It's always say more, do more, prove more. I'm done proving myself to strangers. Sunny opened her mouth to respond, but for once, no words came right away. Her face changed, less of a challenge now, and more of someone trying to understand. Brad shook his head, his voice still sharp, but lower. I came here to talk about a movie. It's a film about hope. About bouncing back. Not to sit here and defend myself because I didn't say the exact words you were hoping to hear. The crowd began to stir, murmurs spreading through the seats. Some people looked like they agreed with him. Others looked tense. Sunny finally spoke again, quiet but clear. I hear you. I do. But I think people wanted to hear that hope from you too. Brad let out a short, bitter laugh. Maybe people should stop looking for hope in actors. The words landed like a slap. They were honest, harsh, and hit deep. This time, the room didn't respond. There was no laughter, no chatter. Just silence. Heavy, still silence. Whoopi broke it, her voice low and careful. Brad, take a breath. But it was too late. Brad had already leaned back in his chair. His face had changed. No longer angry, no longer calm. Just solid, like he'd made a final decision. His eyes moved from the audience, to the cameras, and then back to Sunny. I think I've said enough, he said. His voice was flat, with no emotion left in it. Not warm, not cold, just done. Before anyone could stop him, he pushed back his chair. The sound of the legs scraping the floor echoed loud and clear. A producer offstage waved his arms, mouthing the word, "Stay!" But Brad didn't even look. He stood up, adjusted the cuff of his jacket, and without another word, started walking off stage. The crowd gasped. Some people shouted. Dozens of phones lifted at once to record the moment. "Brad!" Joy called out, rising halfway from her seat, but he didn't turn back. Sunny stayed still, watching him go. Her face calm, but her eyes tracking every step he took. Whoopi let out a quiet sigh, glancing at the camera and then the shocked audience. Brad's footsteps grew softer as he walked behind the curtain, leaving behind an empty chair, a silent reminder of the clash that had just unfolded live before millions of viewers. The camera turned toward the audience for a second, catching their wide-eyed stares, then back to the hosts. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Joy let out a quiet, half-laugh and shook her head. "Well," she said, "I guess we'll go to break." The applause sign flashed, but the clapping that followed was uneven, soft, more like distant thunder than celebration. Behind the scenes, everything was moving quickly. Producers rushed around. Phones buzzed. Crew whispered. Brad's walk-off was already being captured and shared by audience members. Videos with titles like Brad Pitt storms off the view started flooding social media even before the commercial break was finished. As Brad's figure disappeared behind the curtain, the silence he left behind didn't feel empty, it felt full. Full of tension, of questions, of the weight of what had just happened. In the control room, directors gave fast commands. Camera 3, stay wide. Don't follow him backstage. Keep it steady. On set, Joy Behar still had her hand half raised from where she had called out to Brad. Her mouth hung open slightly, stunned. Sunny looked down at her notes for a moment, then back up, her face still composed but her eyes showing something else. Maybe regret. Maybe just the weight of the moment. Whoopi cleared her throat softly. When she spoke, her voice had more gravity than usual. Well, live television, you never really know what's going to happen. There were a few awkward chuckles from the audience, but most people just stayed quiet, unsure if they should laugh or clap. The flashing applause sign above them didn't help. The clapping that followed was slow and uncertain, like everyone was clapping out of habit, not feeling. It was a strange pause, an awkward end to a conversation that had turned into something much deeper than expected. As the show went to commercial again, the moment the red camera lights dimmed, the room filled with quiet voices. Crew members stepped onto the stage. A producer bent down and whispered something to Sunny. She nodded, her face thoughtful but calm. Backstage, Brad Pitt stood near an exit door, his back against the wall, taking slow, steady breaths. A publicist leaned in and said something to him, but he didn't answer. He just looked down at the floor, quiet and still. The doors near the studio opened and closed as staff moved in and out, but Brad didn't move. He stood there alone while the world around him spun. His exit hadn't been a big, angry outburst. It was quiet, steady, like a man who had said what he wanted to say and was done talking. By the time the show came back from the break, Brad was gone. Whoopi looked straight into the camera and addressed the viewers. Her tone was measured, professional, but there was a slight warmth in her voice. As you've just seen, Brad has left us for the day. We're going to keep the conversation going, and we hope everyone remembers that these kinds of talks, even the tough ones, help us all think a little more. Joy tried to lift the mood, giving a small, tight smile. Well, I guess we'll have to invite him back, if he'll come. The audience gave a soft, awkward laugh, but the feeling in the room had changed completely. Sunny sat quietly for a few moments. Her hands were laced in front of her, still and calm. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. I hope he knows the questions weren't meant as an attack. Sometimes the hardest questions are the ones we need the most. Her words hung in the air, unanswered. The show tried to move forward. The producers gently guided the host toward lighter topics, hoping to shift the mood, but the weight of what had happened wouldn't go away. It lingered, not loud, but steady, like an echo after a thunderstorm. The camera slowly pulled back for the wide shot of the table, and one seat remained empty. That empty chair said everything. It was a quiet symbol of the moment they had all just witnessed, live in front of millions of people. As the day went on, the internet lit up. Clips of Brad standing, his chair scraping across the floor, played again and again on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Headlines popped up across entertainment sites. Brad Pitt storms off The View, walk-off shock, Brad loses cool on live TV. Hashtags started trending. Hashtag Brad Pitt walks off, hashtag The Clash, hashtag Sunny vs. Brad. In hours, memes began to spread, images of Brad's serious face paired with captions like, "When you're tired of explaining yourself to the world." Talk shows, podcasts, and late-night hosts started picking it up. People everywhere were talking. Some praised Brad, calling him brave for standing his ground and refusing to perform for public approval. Others criticized him for walking away from an important conversation. The reactions were split, but strong. And the moment became more than just a celebrity headline. It became part of a bigger conversation about fame, voice, and responsibility. By the next morning, clips of the moment had millions of views. Fans and critics filled comment sections and forums with long posts. Some defended Brad, pointing to his years of quiet charity work and personal donations. Others said his silence during major cultural events had been disappointing for a long time, and Sunny had just said what many had felt but never said aloud. Back at the View, the empty chair from the day before still stood out. It wasn't just a seat, it had become a symbol. On the next episode, the hosts briefly spoke about the moment. They stayed professional, but you could feel the leftover tension, like a quiet echo still hanging in the room. The story wasn't just about Brad Pitt losing his temper on live TV. It had become something deeper, about the thin line between personal boundaries and what the public expects. It was about how private beliefs can crash into the loud call for public answers. Even someone as calm and respected as Brad Pitt could break under the weight of being told to be more than just an actor, to be a symbol, a voice, a leader. And now, as the screen fades from that charged studio to you, the viewer, only one question remains: was Brad Pitt right to walk away? Or was Sunny Host simply asking something that needed to be asked? We want to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more real, powerful stories from live TV, the kind you'll never forget, subscribe to Prime Narrator. Hit the like button to help keep these stories going and share this video with your friends. Because sometimes, the biggest drama isn't written in a script. The camera slowly pulls back one final time. The studio lights fade a little. And the narrator's voice drops to a whisper. A reminder that even the most famous people, no matter how polished, how prepared, can still be shaken by a single honest question.